Hello friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort. So we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video, where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So, you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So, let's start the video. Wrong Turn 6, Last Resort, stylized on screen as Wrong Turn 6, is a 2014 American slasher film directed by Valeri Milev. It serves as a reboot and the sixth installment in the Wrong Turn film series. The film was released on DVD and digitally on October 21, 2014. The film grossed $1 million in home sales. It was followed by another entry, titled simply Wrong Turn, 2021. Plot: two bikers have sex in a natural hot tub in the mountains. The Hilliker brothers, Three Finger, Sawtooth, and One Eye, murder them at a bike trail in West Virginia. The brothers are under the care of their demented relatives Jackson and Sally, the caretakers of the local hotel resort, Hobbs Springs. Danny arrives at the resort, run by his cousins Sally and Jackson, to claim inheritance. He is accompanied by his girlfriend Toni, her brother Rod, and their friends Vic, Charlie, Brian with his girlfriend Jillian. Unbeknownst to them, the resort is run and inhabited by cannibals. We then see elderly guest Agnes Fields get struck by an axe, pinning her to the wall where Jackson kills her. Brian and Jillian, who are shopping for groceries the next day, are informed by a concerned Sheriff Doucette of the disappearances of the townsfolk, including the hotel guests and Agnes. As he drives away, Doucette runs into a roadblock where he is killed by Three Finger. Alarmed by Brian and Jillian's news of the townsfolk's fate, the group becomes suspicious of Danny's cousins, along with his need to stay with his family, causing his relationship with the others to deteriorate. Toni sends Vic out into the woods to find Danny, who has gone hunting with Jackson. Vic sees Sawtooth devouring a deer that was killed by Danny. When Danny plans on renovating the hotel to reopen next year, his friends reluctantly agree to stay. Jillian and Brian, however, plan to leave the town and steal items from the hotel for money. While doing so, they discover a hidden door to a basement that leads to an underground bathhouse where Jillian gets horny and seduces Brian into having sex with her. Right after Brian makes Jillian climax midway through, the cannibals abruptly attack the couple. Brian is hit in the head, giving him a crippling brain injury, and then Jillian is brutally dismembered without Brian to protect her. But Sally stops them from killing Brian. She then drags him to her bedroom and rapes him. Next, she asphyxiates him with her pillow under Jackson's orders. Now turning against his friends during a heated argument with Toni, Danny is introduced by Jackson and Sally to his long-lost cannibalistic relatives at the clearing. They explain to Danny, who is a Hilliker, of their origins. Vic follows them and overhears their conversation. He is then captured by the Hillikers, who cut his throat and tear his innards out for the whole clan to eat for the ceremony. As the rest of the group begins to leave the next morning, Toni, Rod, and Charlie discover Jackson cooking meals in the kitchen with the dismembered corpses of the victims, including Brian and Jillian. Horrified, they attempt to escape, only to run into the cannibals who kill both Charlie and Rod. Toni arms herself with a rifle from the armory and enters the bathhouse to confront Sally about manipulating Danny against his friends. As they fight, Toni disfigures Sally and shoots off her leg with the rifle. Enraged, Jackson orders Danny to kill Toni, but he lets her escape. Jackson pursues her until Toni retaliates by stabbing him in the head with the door keys, killing him. Danny, angered with Toni for killing Jackson, allows the cannibals to kill her, with Three Finger hitting Toni in the head with a hatchet. 1 year after the reopening of the resort, renamed Hilliker Springs, Danny becomes the new manager and continues the sordid family tradition by having sex with Sally at the bathhouse as the other Hillikers watch. Cast: Anthony Ilott as Danny, Chris Jarvis as Jackson, Aqueela Zoll as Toni, Sadie Katz as Sally, Rollo Skinner as Vic, Billy Ashworth as Rod, Harry Belcher as Charlie Production. Director Declan O'Brien was replaced by film director Valeri Milev for the 6th installment in the Wrong Turn film series, which originally served as a sequel to Wrong Turn 5 Bloodlines, 2012, to complete the prequel trilogy, but was scrapped. Shooting for the 6th film was reported to have commenced in March 2014 in Bulgaria. Release: Home Media. Fox Home Entertainment released it on home video on October 21, 2014. It grossed over $1 million in combined DVD and Blu-ray sales in North America. Reception: critical response. 28 days later. Analysis reported on it being 10 years since actress Eliza Dushku played Jessie, a woman chased by a gang of cannibal hillbillies. A 10-year run with 5 sequels makes the Wrong Turn film series one of the longest-running horror franchises in recent history. Joel Harley of Starburst rated it 7/10 stars and wrote, "If anything, this is one of the best entries yet." Steve Barton of Dread Central rated it 1.55 stars and called it all crap with a few good moments, though he praised Sadie Katz's acting. Court case. In October 2014, a court case was filed in Ireland over the unauthorized use of a photo of a woman who went missing in County Wexford. The judge declined to issue a temporary injunction, but the case came back to court in early November 2014. As a result of the lawsuit, distributor 20th Century Fox recalled all DVD and Blu-ray releases of the film with no plan to repress or re-release, and have also pulled all online streaming sources. The movie was eventually re-released with the photo in question blurred out. A peculiar tension seemed to settle in the air, an oppressive stillness that made the cars numb. Air conditioning feels somehow inadequate, no signs of life, no other vehicles on you. The road. It was as if the world had forgotten this place existed. Finally, after hours of driving through the increasingly dense woods, they arrived at the entrance to the resort. At first glance, it was almost picturesque as sprawling old building, its stone facade weathered by time, but still imposing. The resort stood at the edge of a vast forest, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets in the wind. It looked like something out of an old postcard. Except there was something wrong with it. The grounds were overgrown, and the rusted gate that should have been welcoming was barely standing, sagging under the weight of neglect. There was a faint, almost imperceptible sense of decay, an air of quiet abandonment that seeped into the very bones of the place. Danny felt a slight twinge in his gut, but he shrugged it off. It was probably just the age of the place. Nothing to be concerned about. The small group of friends stepped out of the car, their boots crunching on the gravel driveway. Jared, always the jokester, made a comment about the place, looking like something straight out of a horror movie. I can already hear the creepy music. He laughed. This is how it starts, right? We're all going to get picked off one by one. Vera shot him a teasing look. Oh, please, Jared. This is a vacation. No one's going to get killed by some deranged lunatic. She was the optimist, the one who always saw the best in things, the one who could turn even the darkest situations into something lighthearted. Danny smiled, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The resort might have looked like a haven from the outside, but there was an undeniable sense of arcane hanging in the air. They made their way inside, greeted by the creak of wooden floors and the musty scent of aged furniture. The lobby, though spacious, was eerily quiet, the silence hanging thick. The walls were adorned with faded tapestries and old paintings that seemed to stare down at them with hollow eyes. The front desk was empty, but there was a single key on the counter, labeled with Danny's name in a spidery script. "Guess we're on our own," Todd said, picking up the key and inspecting it with mild curiosity. "Doesn't seem like there's anyone around. Maybe they just don't get a lot of visitors." Vera suggested, though, her voice wavered slightly, as if she too felt the vor. odd weight of the place they made their way up the creaky stairs, the floorboards groaning under their weight. Their footsteps echoed through the empty halls, amplifying the sense of isolation. It was clear that the resort had once been something grand, perhaps a luxurious escape for wealthy tourists in a bygone era, but now it was a shadow of its former self, its age showing in every cracked tile, faded rug, and peeling wallpaper. The rooms were no better. Danny's was on the third floor, overlooking the vast, untamed forest that stretched beyond the resort's boundaries. The bed, though large, had a strange, unsettling feel to it. The sheets were immaculate, but they smelled faintly of Milu. The bathroom was small, cramped, and the flickering light bulb above the mirror buzzed intermittently. It wasn't exactly what I had envisioned when he thought of an inheritance, but it would do at least for a few days as nightfall approached. The friends gathered in the common room, a large dark-paneled area with a fireplace that had long since gone cold. Jared threw his feet upon a chair, cracking open a beer. Todd was busy fiddling with the outdated television, trying to find something on the static-filled channels. Vera sat near the windows, staring out at the woods. The atmosphere in the room was sheevy and the playful energy from earlier had slowly built away. It was almost as if the night itself carried a weight of its own, a thick shroud that suffocated any sense of peace. "You guys ever get the feeling something's watching us?" Vera's voice broke the silence, and for a moment the others froze. Her tone was quiet, almost uncertain. "Watching us?" Jared repeated, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," she replied slowly, her gaze drifting to the darkened trees. "Outside, it's just too quiet, like there's something out there waiting." Danny's eyes wandered to the darkening sky outside, his thoughts momentarily drifting to the unsettling feeling that had nagged at him all day. But before he could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the halls, footsteps that were too deliberate, too rhythmic, heavy boots. The group fell silent, exchanging uneasy glances. The footsteps grew closer, and then the door to the common room creaked open, revealing a tall man dressed in an old, worn-out suit. His face, obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed, had an aura of quiet authority. But something about him made Danny's skin crawl. "Guests." The man's voice was growly, almost too quiet. "Yes," Danny answered hesitantly, taken aback by the man's sudden appearance. "We're here to check in." The man said nothing more, merely gesturing for them to follow him down the hallway. His silence was thick, heavy, and disconcerting, and Danny couldn't shake the feeling that he was being led deeper into something darker than he could ever imagine. As the man led them down the narrow hallway, Danny's anus only grew. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the odd behavior, the strange quiet that seemed to hang over everything. There was something deeply unsettling about the man. He moved with an eerie, deliberate slowness, as though he had all the time in the world. The others followed behind their footsteps, falling in sync with his, though none of them spoke. The silence was suffocating. The hallway stretched on longer than it seemed it should. The walls were adorned with old paintings, their subjects dressed in outdated fashion, their eyes watching from the canvas very corner. They felt like they were venturing deeper into the unknown, further into the heart of the resort's dark mystery. Finally, the man stopped in front of a heavy wooden door, worn by time, but still imposing without a word. He turned the knob and stepped aside, motioning for Danny and the others to enter. Inside the room was dimly lit a single lamp, casting a palilo glow over the dusty furniture. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and stagnant hair in the corners, Tudor-Nornated-esque. Its surface cluttered with old papers and books. The man made his way to the desk, his every movement slow, deliberate. It was as if they were intruding on some things, something they had no business disturbing. "Sit," the man instructed, his voice low but commanding. There was an undeniable weight to his words, a heaviness that made Danny hesitate before sitting down. The others followed suit, each of them taking a seat around the room, their faces with discomfort. A long silence hung in the air before the man spoke again. "You've come to claim what is your shavant you?" His voice was even, without the slightest hint of emotion, but there was something behind it, something hidden in his tone that made Danny's stomach tighten. "Yes," Danny said, his voice almost a whisper. "We came to check in. I inherited this place, but I don't understand. Who are you? What is all of this?" The man's eyes narrowed, but there was no malice in them, only something far colder, something ancient. "You don't remember, do you?" he said softly. "The blood, the connection." Danny blinked. "Confused blood connection." The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to the desk and picked up a thick, weathered ledger. He flipped it open to a page that was yellowed with age. The ink faded, but still legible. "Your family has deep roots in these mountains," he said. "Samuel, Harland was your uncle, yes, but he was also one of us. One of the ones who came before you. You've inherited more than just their sort. You've inherited the curse." The word struck Danny like a physical blow. A curse. What was he talking about? His head was spinning, a rush of questions flooding his mind. But how? Why didn't? I know, Danny stammered, his heart racing. He never knew him and never had any family here. Why didn't anyone tell me? The man's lips curled into a thin smile. It's always been this way. Those who inherit are chosen, but they never remember. The blood runs deep, Danny. And now it's your turn to take your place. Before Danny could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside, followed by a scream. Vera's voice. Without thinking, Danny shot to his feet, this pulse pounding in his ears. The man's expression didn't change. "You should go," he said, his voice calm, almost detached. But Danny couldn't move fast enough. His friends were in danger. Her ushered out of the room, the others right behind him. The hallway was eerily quiet now, but the tension was palpable. The air felt thick, as though something was waiting just beyond their reach. They burst into the common room. What they saw stopped them in their tracks, for was standing in the Delia of the room, here yes wide with fear. Her clothes were torn, and there was a streak of blood running down her cheek. She was staring at the wall, but her eyes weren't seeing anything. Her mouth was moving, but no sound came out. A figure stood in the corner, cloaked in shadows. Was something else, something twisted and wrong. The figure's movements were jerky, unnatural, like it was trying to fit into a body that wasn't its own. "Vera!" Danny shouted, rushing toward her, but before he could reach her, the figure turned and in one swift motion it lunged at him, knocking him to the floor. The air was thick with the scent of decay as it hovered over him, its eyes gleaming with malice. Danny struggled, pushing against the creature's weight, but it was too strong. The sound of the others' footsteps was drowned out by the screeching of something metal. Suddenly, the creature was pulled off him, and a figure appeared in the doorway. It was the man from earlier, the one who had led them here. He held a large, rusted wrench in his hand, his grip tight around it, as he swung it at the creature, knocking it back. "Run!" he shouted. "Go!" Now Danny didn't need to be told twice. His legs felt like lead, but he pushed through the fear, grabbing Vera by the arm and pulling her toward the exit. Todd and Jared were close behind. They rushed through the hallways, but every door they passed was locked. The resort seemed to close in around them, the walls pressing tighter, the hallway longer than before. The familiar sounds of the forest outside had disappeared, replaced by the howling wind and the distant rumble of thunder. It was only when they reached the back door that Danny understood the man wasn't trying to help them. He had been leading them into a trap. The door burst open, revealing the woods beyond, but it was not an escape. The moment they had of their situation hit them like a tidal wave. The trees loomed impossibly high, their branches thick with shadows, and standing among them, watching them with predatory eyes, were the twisted inbred family, the ones who had been waiting for them, and standing at the front of the group was another man. The same one from the ledger. His face was pale, but his eyes shone with a cruel gleam. "You should have never come here," he said, his voice low and cold. "Now you are part of us." As the group turned to flee, they realized it was too late. The resort, the woods, and the family were all part of something far darker, something that would not let them go. Every step they took, they were being drawn deeper into the nightmare, a nightmare that had been waiting for someone like Danny to come back home. The chase through the woods was a blur of terror, but in the end it was futile. The family's twisted embrace closed in on them. The forest swallowed them whole, and one by one they fell in the end. Danny was the last to fall. His body hit the cold ground, his vision dimming as the last thing he saw was the face of the man from the resort. This cold with satisfaction. It was over. The curse had claimed him as it had claimed those before him, and now the resort would wait for the next one to inherit its dark legacy. As the wind howled through the trees, a new name was added to the ledger, and the cycle began again. He had always been someone who found comfort in the predictable. His life in the city, though uninspiring, was something he could count on. The mundane rhythm of his days provided a sense of stability, an illusion of control. But beneath it all, Danny was adrift, haunted by the feeling that there was something more to life than the humdrum of his routine, his eyes always searching for something new, reflected a quiet yearning that he could never fully articulate. The letter that had come one fateful morning with its promises of a resort and an inheritance he never knew existed had been an answer to an unspoken question. Though it had come out of nowhere, it felt like destiny had knocked on his door, and he couldn't resist the PLL to answer it. The truth was, Danny didn't know much about his family. He had grown up in foster care, drifting from one home to the next, never really settling anywhere. His name had always been a shadow over him, something he couldn't grasp or fully understand. When he first received the letter, a small part of him had dismissed it as a mistake, but that part of him was outweighed by the promise of something new, something that might fill the empty paces inside him. He believed that the trip would be a chance to rediscover himself, to finally make sense of the fragmented pieces of his past. But what he didn't anticipate was how that journey would turn his world upside down the moment they arrived at the resort. The pull of it had settled in his chest. The house, the man at the front desk, and the silent, oppressive atmosphere of the place all hinted at something far darker than he had expected. Danny had entered the resort with hope clinging to the idea of discovery. But with each passing moment, the reality of his inheritance began to unravel. The trust he placed in the idea of a new beginning quickly transformed into dread. The resort wasn't a place for healing. It was a place where things were buried, where something ancient lingered, and where Danny, whether he liked it or not, had a part to play as the story unfolded. Danny's true came to the forefront at his core. He was a survivor, though perhaps not in the way he had imagined himself. He wasn't an adventurer. He didn't seek danger for the thrill of it. But when his friends' lives were at stake, he transformed. The hesitance that had defined his life in the city was replaced by urgency. His instincts kicked in moments of panic. Danny's resolve sharpened. There was no more room for doubt, no more hesitation. The past, with its painful memories and uncertainty, faded into the background as he fought for survival. But even as he fought, there was a quiet sadness in his eyes, an acknowledgement that he was losing something far more important than just his life. He was losing his connection to the world he once knew, and with each passing moment, that world became further and further. Out of reach, Vera was the opposite of Danny in many ways. Where Danny was quiet, reserved, and often lost in thought, Vera was bold, energetic, and quick to embrace the unexpected. She had a lightness to her, a carefree attitude that contrasted sharply with the growing tension in the air. At their sort from the moment she stepped into the place, Vera took it upon herself to make the best of it. She joked, laughed, and tried to lighten the mood. She was the glue that held their small group together, the one who always had a smile ready, even when things didn't make sense. But beneath that bright exterior, Vera, demons, ones that she tried to outrun with humor and optimism. Her relationship with Danny was built on a shared history, one of long conversations and late-night talks about their dreams and fears. But even with that bond, there was a part of Vera that felt isolated. She didn't want to face the darkness in herself, and the resort's eerie presence brought that darkness to the surface. Vera's arc was one of growth, though in the most tragic of ways. As the terror escalated, Vera's optimism began to crumble, and she was forced to confront the reality of their situation. The horror that unfolded around them was too real, too suffer. Aiding for her to deny the lightness she had once carried with her was replaced by a desperate determination to survive, to protect her friends, to do anything that would allow her to escape the grasp of the ancient curse that held the resort in its wayway. But the more she fought, the more she realized that the escape she had hoped for was impossible. She fought for her friends, but in the end, she couldn't outrun the curse. Vera's performance, a balance of lightheartedness and eventual despair, brought a depth to her character that made her more than just comic relief. She was a symbol of the fight to hold on to hope, even when the odds were stacked against her. Jared, the joker of the group, was the one who initially downplayed the gravity of their situation. He was the first to crack jokes about the spooky atmosphere, and while his humor helped to ease the tension in the early days, it also revealed the facade he wore. Jared didn't know how to handle the unknown, so he masked it with laughter. when things turned dire. His bravado began to waver, and his fear became palpable. But Jared's arc wasn't one of complete collapse. Instead, it was about learning to confront his fear. However reluctantly, when the horrors of the resort became unavoidable, Jared transitioned from the role of comic relief to that of an unwilling hero. His instincts, which had always been about avoidance and distraction, were no longer enough. He became a reluctant participant in the struggle and been forced to face the monsters. She'd always laughed at Todd. The more stoic member of the group was the one who always had his guard up. Unlike the others, she didn't give in to the emotional pull of the resort. Instead, he analyzed it, tried to figure out what was happening. He was skeptical of everything, and his suspicions became sharper as the nights wore on. Todd had always been a practical person, the type who didn't entertain the supernatural. But as the resort's true nature revealed itself, he became obsessed with understanding the forces at play. Todd's transformation was one of intellectual curiosity turned to desperation. His need to understand became a way to control the situation. But as the group's survival became more uncertain, his control unraveled. Todd was faced with the realization that some things couldn't be understood, no matter how much knowledge you had. The terror was something beyond reason, something that could not be explained away. And then there was the man, the one who had been there all along, watching from the shadows. He was the keeper of the secrets, the one who guided Danny and his friends into the dark embrace of the resort. His motivations were unclear at first, but as the story unfolded, his true role became chillingly evident. He wasn't a mere guide, he was part of the darkness that consumed the resort. His calm demeanor and cryptic words only masked the terrifying truth. He was one of them. He had been waiting for Danny, waiting for the bloodline to return. His presence was both a curse and a necessary evil, a reminder that no one could escape the inevitable fate that had been set in motion long before they arrived. Each of these characters brought something to the table, not just in terms of their roles in the story, but in the emotional weight they carried. Their individual arcs were threads woven together, creating a complex tapestry of survival, loss, and the ultimate confrontation with fate. The performances from the actors brought their personalities to life in ways that made the horror feel more real, more personal. It was not just the threat of physical danger that haunted them, but the unraveling of their own identities and the horrifying realization that they were trapped in a story much bigger than themselves. Each character's evolution, from the naive excitement of arrival to the crushing realization of their fate, made their eventual struggles all the more tragic. The emotional depth of each character was crucial to the story's impact. It wasn't just about surviving the resort's horrors. It was about how they faced the darkness within themselves and the terrifying truths that they could no longer escape, and in the end, none of them emerged unscathed. The horrors of the resort weren't just physical, they were psychological, emotional, and deeply personal. The characters' growth, their shifting from fear to acceptance, and their eventual tragic end all played into the larger theme of inevitability of cycles that could not be broken. The making of Wrong Turn. Six Last Resort was an ambitious endeavor, one that involved a series of challenges behind-the-scenes decisions and unexpected moments that would later shape the final product for many viewers. The movie's success lies in its balance of traditional horror elements with a fresh sense of eerie atmosphere. The team behind the film understood the importance of setting tone and performance to make the most out of a story that on the surface might have seemed like a typical slasher sequel, but what the audience didn't see was the intricate web of decisions and behind-the-scenes moments that brought it all to life. Filming took place in the heart of a remote location in the Appalachian Mountains, a choice that would later prove essential to the movie's atmosphere. The setting played an enormous role in establishing the eerie, unsettling feeling that permeated the story. The production team chose to shoot at an old, dilapidated mansion that had been abandoned for decades, its creaky wood and shadowy corners lending a natural sense of foreboding to every scene. However, shooting in such a remote location came with its own set of challenges. For one, the weather was unpredictable, often forcing the crew to halt filming. when heavy rain or dense fog rolled in. There were times when the mist would settle around the mansion in such a way that it completely shrouded the set, adding a layer of unexpected difficulty in maintaining continuity between shots. The fog, while a gift for atmosphere, also made logistics challenging beyond the weather. The physical demands of working in a remote area became evident. The actors and crew had to end with the harsh terrain, making it difficult to move equipment or travel between locations, as the story called for several action-packed sequences through thick woods and uneven ground. The physical strain was a constant issue at times. The crew had to make do with whatever they could find in the surrounding area. The mansion was far from equipped with modern amenities, so improvisation was key. The cast members, including the leads, who had to make their way through the woods during intense chase scenes, found themselves relying on their stamina and quick thinking. There were moments when the actors themselves would be tasked with lugging, feel more grounded, even though it added to the growling nature of the shoot. While the physical challenges were one thing, the production team had to be just as creative when it came to the practical effects that defined much of the horror in Wrong Turn 6, Last Resort. Known for its reliance on practical, hands-on horror rather than CGI, the team used prosthetics, makeup, and physical props to create the grotesque characters and brutal deaths that have become a hallmark of the series. Special effects designer James McAllister led the effort to create realistic, horrifying looks for the inbred family, as well as the gruesome aftermath of their attacks. Each character had a unique, disfigured appearance that required extensive makeup sessions and hours spent in the makeup chair. The team had to come up with creative ways to make these characters appear not only grotesque, but also believable. Some of the prosthetics were so intricate that the actors had to endure several hours in the makeup chair before each scene. The makeup process itself was intense, with full-body prosthetics and masks that would often restrict the actors' movements, making their performances all the more impressive. A notable aspect of the film was its balance between horror and suspense. The decision to keep much off the violence of screen in favor of building dread and tension was not accidental. Director Valm understood that true horror didn't just come from shock value, but from the slow burn of mounting tension. This approach led to some interesting discussions among the production team. There was a desire to make sure the audience felt the horror in their bones, not just through gruesome images, but through an atmosphere of suffocating fear. To achieve this, the filmmakers took special care in choosing camera angles and lighting to emphasize the unknown. Shadows played an integral role in building fear. Many of the scariest moments took place in darkness, with just enough light to give the audience a sense of what might be lurking. Some moments of suspense were built entirely through sound design, which was another critical component of the film's success. The sound team was led by the talented Gabriel Thompson, who worked tirelessly to create a haunting auditory landscape that added to the unease. The creaking floorboards, the wind howling through the trees, the faint whispers and distant screams. It was all carefully crafted to place the audience. One event, the sound of footsteps, was designed to be unnerving. Often there was a subtle shift in the soundscape that made the characters' movements seem like they were echoing through an empty cavernous space. These details, while small, were vital to the overall experience. Another aspect of the production that made Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort stand out was its careful consideration of the character dynamics. The decision to have the protagonists stumble upon their own dark inheritance was a key turning point, setting the film apart from typical slasher fare. The addition of a twist involving the character's lineage and connection to the twisted inbred family was a last-minute change that significantly shaped the movie. Initially, the film was set to focus more on the survival horror aspects of the story, with the group simply trying to escape the resort. However, after a series of script revisions, the filmmakers decided to deepen the story by adding a darker familial connection. This added a new layer of complexity, turning the film into a deeper exploration of identity, legacy, and the inescapable nature of fate. Danny's inheritance and his family's involvement in the curse that plagued the resort became a central thematic element, making the film about more than just escaping a murderous family. It was about confronting the past accepting one's heritage, and realizing that some things cannot be outrun. The twists and turns of the story were also made possible by some inspired casting choices. The actors who portrayed the group of friends brought unique perspectives and energy to their roles, each one adding a depth of personality that made their eventual fates all the more tragic. The chemistry between the cast members helped bring the group dynamic to life, allowing them to seem like an aerial group of friends, even as the tension and fear mounted. One memorable piece of trivia revolves around how the actors would have improvised their lines during scenes to add a sense of authenticity to their interactions. This unscripted dial created moments of levity, even in the most horrific parts of the film, making their fear and vulnerability feel more real. Perhaps the most fascinating behind-the-scenes detail is the way the filmmakers decided to design the resort itself. Initially conceived as a place of mystery and isolation, the mansion's interior was intended to be a reflection of the eerie history of the inbred family. Set designer Rachel Atkins used historical references from the surrounding Appalachian region to craft rooms and hallways that felt as though they had been frozen. In-time old furniture, vintage wallpaper, and dusty antiques helped establish the mood, but the key was in the small, almost imperceptible details. The walls were adorned with photographs of long-dead relatives, their faces faded but still hauntingly present. Watching the characters as they explored these small touches, invisible to some viewers, contributed to the overall feeling of being watched, of never truly being alone in terms of Easter eggs. Wrong Turn 6 is filled with small nods to the franchise's enter. Legacy fans of the earlier films in the series will notice references to previous characters, events, and even props. One particularly subtle reference appears in the form of a map displayed in the background of one of the rooms, though it's barely visible. It shows the locations of past killings from the earlier films, tying the events of Wrong Turn 6 back to the franchise's larger narrative. These hidden details were a conscious decision by the filmmakers, who wanted to pay homage to the fans of the series while also establishing Last Resort as a new chapter in the Wrong Turn saga. The film's production was not without its setbacks. However, with a limited budget and a tight shooting schedule, the team had to work creatively with what they had. The special effects team was forced to repurpose old costumes and props from previous films, cutting costs while still delivering impressive results. There were moments of improvisation, as when one of the planned kills had to be reworked due to time constraints, but the actors and crew rolled with the punches, always finding solutions to the challenges at hand. Despite these difficulties, the production of Wrong Turn 6 was ultimately a triumph of collaboration and creativity. It's a film born from the collective vision of a team dedicated to creating a terrifying experience that would stay with audiences long after the credits rolled behind every scare, every gruesome prosthetic, and every twisted reveal. There was an understanding that the horror of the story wasn't just in what was seen, but in the dark, lingering mystery of what could never be fully understood. Through a combination of eerie set design, creative practical effects, and a solid cast, Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort was able to transcend its slasher roots and carve out its own place in the franchise's dark, twisted legacy. And it all started with a remote mansion, a group of friends, and the horrifying realization that some legacies are impossible to escape from the moment the camera first pans over the isolated mansion. A sense of unease is instilled in both the characters and the audience. The choice to open Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort with such a haunting image is more than just a visual choice. It's a thematic statement. This dilapidated mansion, which promises answers, but only terror, serves as a perfect microcosm for the film's larger narrative. As Danny and his friends approach the resort, there is a sense of inevitability hanging in the air, setting the stage for the psychological horror that will soon unfold. It's not just the setting that is crucial to this beginning, but also the quiet foreshadowing of what's to come. The eerie stillness of the mansion is a deliberate move, hinting at the horror that lurks just beneath the surface, a theme that will resonate throughout the film. One of the most significant moments in the film happens early on when Danny discovers the mysterious letter that beckons him to the mansion. His reaction to the inheritance, a combination of disbelief and curiosity, is important not just for understanding his character, but but also for the way it introduces the film's central conflict at its heart wrong turns. X is about the collision between past and present. Danny's arrival at the mansion is not just a chance for him to learn about his family's legacy. It's the beginning of a journey that will force him to confront who he really is. This moment serves as a turning point in Dee's life, but also marks the moment when the characters and audience realize that this isn't going to be a simple vacation or even a typical family reunion from the start. The audience is made aware that the mansion, the inheritance, and the family ties Danny's about-town cover are tangled in darkness and deceit. As Danny and his friends settle in, the mounting sense of discomfort grows, but it's the first encounter with the grotesque family members that elevates the film from unsettling to truly disturbing. The moment when they come face to face with the twisted inbred family is a pivotal one. It's not just about the shock of seeing their disfigured faces and monstrous nature, but about what these characters represent in the larger context of the film. They embody the dangers of history left unchecked, the generational weight of violence, and the haunting repercussions of family legacies that cannot be outrun. The introduction of these characters marks the point of no return for Danny and his friends. It's a confrontation with the past that turns personal as Danny realizes that he too is connected to this twisted bloodline. The brutality of the family is a mirror to the violent history of the land and the house itself, an unyielding reminder that some things cannot be escaped no matter how far you run. But it's not just the grotesque visuals that define this moment, it's the emotional and thematic impact it carries. Danny's reaction to this discovery, his horror, confusion, and eventual acceptance of his place in this dark family tree is integral to the film's exploration of identity. His personal struggle, torn between wanting to reject his lineage and the harsh truth of his inheritance, strikes at the core of what it means to confront one's past for the audience. This is not just a scary revelation. It's a reflection of a universal fear of uncovering dark truths about oneself, of realizing that your identity is shaped not just by your choices, but by forces beyond your control. The horror in this scene is deeply personal, not just for Danny, but for everyone. We've all been in some way confronted with our past, with aspects of our identity that we may not fully understand or wish to acknowledge. Wrong Turns X uses this moment as a way to tape into a primal fear, the fear of being tied to something monstrous, something that cannot be undone. As the story progresses, the film's pacing begins to take on a more urgent tenor with the mounting tension serving as a constant undercurrent. The friendships between the characters are tested in ways that feel all too real. The earlier lighthearted banter, especially between Vera and Jared, gradually gives way to fear and mistrust. The descent into chaos is inevitable, but it is the emotional unraveling of the characters that hits hardest. When Vera begins to show signs of emotional and psychological collapse, it becomes clear that the resort's horrors aren't just physical. The terror is as much about the mind as it is about the body. Vera's breaking point, her inability to cope with the mounting violence around her, is a key emotional turning point in the film. The moment when she tries to fight back only to be overwhelmed by the terror surrounding her serves as a tragic commentary on the limitations of hope in the face of absolute horror. It's a moment that speaks to the human condition, where sometimes, no matter how hard we cannot escape the suffocating grip of fear. The film's true emotional core, however, lies in Dan's transformation. He starts the film as an uncertain, almost naive character driven by a need to understand his origins, but as the story unfolds, he's forced to confront his deepest fears, not only about the violent family, but about his own ability to rise to the occasion. The climax of the film, where Danny faces off against the monstrous family members, is not just about survival, it's about self-realization. Throughout the film, Danny's struggle is with his identity, and in the end it is only through embracing the darkness of his past that he's able to survive. The emotional significance of this moment is profound. It's a commentary on the complexity of human nature, where light and darkness coexist, and where survival often means confronting the very things you've been running from. Danny's ultimate triumph, such as it is, comes not from rejecting his past, but from accepting it, understanding that he cannot escape what he is, but he can control what he becomes. The film's resolution is both satisfying and haunting. There is no true escape from the horrors of the resort, and as the survivors slowly dwindle, the grim reality of the situation sets in the final moments. the film takes a dark turn, offering no real sense of closure, only the cyclical nature of the violence that has plagued the family for generations. The emotional resonance of the film's ending lies in its hopelessness. There is no true escape, no redemption. The characters, like the land they inhabit, are trapped in a web of violence that stretches back centuries, and no matter how much they fight, they cannot break free. The film ends on a note of tragic inevitability, with Danny's acceptance of his fate, mirroring the larger theme of the film, that some legacies are too powerful to escape, and some curses can never be broken in the broader scope of the film. This sense of inescapability resonates with viewers on a deep emotional level. It speaks to the human experience of grappling with things beyond our control, whether it's family history, societal expectations, or personal fears, and the inevitability of certain outcomes. Danny's journey is symbolic of our own struggles to define ourselves, to understand who we're in the context of our past, and to reconcile with the darkness that sometimes resides within us. This exploration of identity and legacy is what makes Wrong Turn 6 more than just a slasher film. It is a meditation on the ways in which the past shapes the present, and how no matter how hard we try, we cannot escape the ghosts that haunt us. Through its key moments, from the discovery of the family's twisted legacy to Danny's final confrontation with the horrors surrounding him. The film builds an emotional and thematic resonance that lingers long after the credits roll. It is a film about fear, not just the fear of the unknown, but the fear of what we're capable of, what we're tied to, and what we cannot change. It is in these moments, both brutal and intimate, that Wrong Turn 6 reveals its true power. It is a horror filmy, but it is also Alistark's exploration of the darkness within the human soul, and the unsettling realization that we're all bound by forces beyond our control. Through this lens, the film becomes more than just a tale of survival. It becomes a chilling meditation on fate, legacy, and the relentless pull of the past. The filmmaking process behind Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort was a complex and carefully crafted endeavor, where every choice from the cinematography to the sound design worked in unison to create a sense of mounting dread that permeates the entire film. The technical aspects of the film are where the story's atmosphere truly comes to life, turning a basic slasher narrative into something more visceral, psychological, and intense. Each scene is meticulously framed, every sound carefully crafted, and each element of the production contributes to the movie's oppressive, unsettling mood. The cinematography in Wrong Turn 6 is one of the film's strongest suits from the very first shots. The film establishes a visual language that enhances its themes of isolation and inescapability. The decision to shoot much of the film in a dark, brooding mansion surrounded by thick, eerie woods was not just about aesthetics, it was about the psychology of space cinematographer Manuel Biter, known for his ability to capture tension and atmosphere, crafted a visual style that was both haunting and functional. The camera often lingers on empty hallways or shadowy corners, subtly hinting at dangers lurking just out of sight. The tight close-ups of the characters' faces, especially when they are navigating the mansion, amplify the feeling of claustrophobia and impending doom. There's a deliberate choice to make the space feel small, as if the walls are closing in around the characters. It creates a sense of vulnerability, as if, no matter how hard they try to escape, they will always be trapped within the boundaries of the mansion's dark history. A particularly striking example of the film's cinematography comes in the form of the fog-filled woods, where Danny and his friends venture deeper into the unknown. The fog is used not only to create a sense of mystery, but as a tool to distort perception. The camera drifts through the mist, obscuring parts of the scene, while allowing brief glimpses of the characters as though they are ghosts in the very environment. It's a visual representation of the unknown, the feeling of being watched by something unseen, something just beyond the frame. This use of fog alongside tight camera work that often keeps the characters just out of full view helps build the tension and contributes to the film's overwhelming sense of paranoia, even when the characters are not in immediate danger. The camera makes sure to keep them always on edge, shifting angles quickly to keep the audience uncertain about what lies ahead. But the cinematography isn't just about creating tension, it also has to serve the story. The transition from the initial calm and curiosity of the characters to their eventual horror is reflected in the cinematography. Gradual shift early on. The lighting is softer, warmer, giving the impression that everything is still normal. But as the story progresses and the characters delve deeper into the mysteries of the mansion, the lighting becomes harsher, colder, and more erratic. It's as though the very nature of the film's world shifts with the plot. Where once there was warmth, now there is only stark, unfeeling light that casts long, disturbing shadows. This gradual visual change mirrors the character's emotional journey. What starts as an exploration of curiosity and intrigue becomes a descent into terror and dread. It is in these small but crucial visual choices that the film's sense of impending doom is articulated without saying a word. Equally important is the sound design, which is the unsung hero of Wrong Turn 6. Much like the cinematography, the sound of design serves as a constant presence in the film, helping to evoke emotion and shape the atmosphere. The film soundscape is a carefully constructed blend of diegetic and non-tick sounds, creating a world where the silence is often just as powerful as the screams. Sound designer Gabriel Thompson, known for his subtle approach to creating tension through auditory cues, worked closely with the filmmakers to ensure that every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind through the trees, every soft whisper in the distance heightened the anxiety felt by both the characters and the audience. The sound the mansion itself is almost like another character in the story, from the creaking floors to the distant echoes in the hallways. The house feels alive, as though it is constantly shifting and changing. The subtle, almost imperceptible noises, shifting walls, doors opening on their own, faint footsteps, serve to settle the view long before any overtly frightening events take place. It's a masterclass in creating fear from nothing, but sound the filmmakers often use the environment itself to contribute to the tension. For instance, the constant howling of the wind in the trees serves as a reminder of how isolated the characters are, amplifying their vulnerability. It also sets up a stark contrast between the silence of the mansion's interiors, where the characters seem to be trapped in an unnerving quiet, only to be broken by the shrill sounds of violence and terror. The music also plays a key role in creating mood. Composer Andreas K. Pusch, who worked with the sound team, crafted a score that complements the visuals perfectly, rather than relying on bombastic, over-the-top horror music. The score is eerie, minimalist, and often works in tandem with the ambient sounds of the environment. There is a subtle to the music that allows it to creep up on the audience, only rising in intensity when the threat is at its peak. At its quietest, the music is almost a low hum, but it becomes more discordant. As the tension heightens, this use of sound is particularly effective during moments of suspense, where the music swells, just enough to hint at what's to come, without ever fully revealing it. The crescendo of the score during key moments adds to the emotional weight of the film, pushing the audience into a heightened state of awareness. Creative decisions were made on set that helped push the visual and auditory storytelling even further. One of the most memorable aspects of the production was the collaboration between the sound and lighting teams. The decision to shoot many of the action sequences in near total darkness, with only faint glimmers of light from torches or candles, forced the audience to rely heavily on the sounds of the environment. The filmmakers often chose to use ambient noise to drive the tension rather than rely on jump-scale CS. This technique allowed the filmmakers to build a sense of dread through subtle auditory cues, low growls, sudden shifts in the wind, or doors slowly creaking open. These moments, when paired with the dim lighting, created an experience where the audience wasn't sure whether something was real or just their mind playing tricks on them. The decision to make the soundscape so integral to the atmosphere was a conscious one, ensuring that the tension was never reliant solely on the visual, but also on what was heard. There were also moments where the filmmakers intentionally broke from traditional horror convention in order to evoke a stronger emotional reaction from the audience. One such moment is the scene where Danny finally learns about the twisted family ties that bind him to the mansion. The dialogue during this revelation is sparse, but the sound design plays a crucial role in heightening the emotional weight of the moment. As Danny slowly begins to piece together the horrific truth about his lineage, The ambient sounds grow louder, the creaking of the house, the distant whispers, and the rising hum of the score. These sounds amplify Danny's internal struggle, creating an emotional intensity that makes the revelation feel more visceral. The filmmakers used sound to communicate Dan's growing horror, as well as the crushing weight of his heritage. It's a subtle but powerful technique that show sound can become an emotional vehicle, conveying a character's psychological state just as much as their actions. On set, the filmmakers were incredibly dedicated to making sure that the film's horror elements were as grounded in reality as possible. This commitment to realism extended to the practical effects used throughout the film. Much of the gore violence in Wrong Turn 6 was achieved through prosthetics, makeup, and physical props, rather than relying on CGI. The decision to use practical effects added a tangible, gritty quality to the film, making the horror feel more visceral and immediate. The special effects team worked tirelessly to create realistic wounds and grotesque creature designs, using prosthetics to craft the inbred family's disfigured features for the actors. This meant are spent in makeup chairs, but the payoff was clear. The physicality of these effects made the terror more grounded, and the actors had to react to these real-world, tangible horrors rather than imagined ones. The decision to shoot in such a remote location also created a unique challenge for the filmmakers. The mansion was not only isolated, but also difficult to access, making it harder for the crew to set up equipment and move between locations in many ways. The isolation of the location mirrored the characters' emotional states. They are cut off from the outside world, just as the film's technical aspects immerse the viewer in a world where escape seems impossible. The crew had to work with limited resources and sometimes had to improvise. It wasn't unusual for the cast and crew to find solutions on the fly, from creating makeshift lighting rigs to utilizing natural elements in the environment to enhance the atmosphere. This kind of creative problem-solving became an essential part of the film's production, adding an element of realism to the horror. Throughout the process, it became clear that the film's technical aspects, cinematography, sound, lighting, and special effects were all intricate, linked to the emotional and thematic core of the story. The filmmakers understood that the real terror in Wrong Turn 6 wasn't just in the violent acts depicted on screen, but in the atmosphere of dread and tension that was built from the very first frame. Each creative decision was made with the intention of pulling the audience deeper into the film's twisted world, making them feel the isolation, the fear, and the inevitability of the character's fate. Through expert collaboration, Wrong Turn 6 became more than just another entry in the slasher genre. It became an experience, one that was shaped by its technical execution as much as its storytelling at its core. Wrong Turn 6, Last Resort, is more than a slasher film. With its gruesome twists and shocking moments of horror, beneath the surface of blood-soaked gore and chilling encounters lies a much deeper exploration of human nature, identity, and legacy. The film draws from timeless themes of isolation, inheritance, and the burden of the past, offering an unsettling commentary on how these elements shape and define who we are, often in ways we cannot escape. Every gruesome turn in the plot, every ominous detail, and every haunting moment of violence is not just a scare, it's a reflection of the psychological and emotional landscape the characters navigate as they try to come to terms with their pasts and their fate. So one of the central themes that runs through the movie is the inescapability of family and the darkness of inherited legacies. From the outset, Danny's arrival at the mansion is filled with a sense of hopefulness, curiosity, and optimism. He believes that this inheritance might be the answer to his fractured life, a chance to connect to a family he never knew. However, what he discovers instead is the horrifying reality that the family legacy is tied to grotesque violence and cruelty. This inheritance, rather than being something of value, is a curse, an unbreakable chain that binds him to the past. The mansion, with its rotting walls and dark corners, becomes a symbol of the weight of history, an oppressive force that suffocates the present. Danny's desire to escape the brutal truths of his lineage becomes his undoing as he slowly comes to realize that his ties to this violent bloodline are not something he can outrun in many ways. The mansion itself embodies this theme of legacy. It's not just a location in the traditional sense. It's a physical manifestation of history's hold on the present. Each room, each hallway in the mansion is a prison of memory, a repository of family secrets that will not remain buried. The house in its eerie and decaying state speaks to the corruption that lies within the family and the land itself. The walls that once might have held joy and warmth now only echo with the horror of the past. There's an inescapable weight to this symbol, no matter how hard the characters try to escape the mansion's walls. They always seem to be drawn back to them, unable to free themselves from its grasp. The mansion is a literal and figurative prison, and it holds its inhabitants, whether they are aware of it or not, in a vice-like grip. Tied to this theme of legacy is the film's exploration of identity and self-discovery. Throughout the story, Danny grapples with a shocking realization that his identity is not his own. It is a byproduct of a past he never knew, a bloodline that runs through him, whether he accepts it or not. This is where the film's psychological horror becomes especially powerful. Danny, like so many individuals, seeks to define himself on his own terms, only to find that the past he never knew is inextricably linked to who he is. This exploration of identity is deeply unsettling because it forces both Danny and the audience to confront an uncomfortable truth. The things we inherit, be they blood, history, or trauma, shape us in ways that go far beyond our own understanding. The idea that Danny could be the product of a lineage so monstrous that his very survival depends on accepting this. Legacy challenges the idea of personal autonomy. In this way, the film taps into a universal fear, the fear that who we are might not be entirely of our own making. The theme of isolation also plays a crucial role in the film, as the characters venture further into the mansion and its surrounding woods. They are cut off from the outside world, both physically and emotionally. The isolation of the mansion amplifies the sense of helplessness and entrapment that runs throughout the narrative. The characters are isolated not only by geography, as the mansion is located in a remote and desolate area, but also by the psychological barriers they face. Danny and his friends are surrounded by a family whose twisted nature is impossible to understand, let alone escape. This sense of being trapped both by the house and by the families. Legacy is palpable in every scene. The mansion's walls are not just a barrier to escape. They represent the emotional and psychological walls that the characters cannot break through, no matter how hard they try. The isolation remains intensifying their sense of vulnerability and desperation. This theme of isolation is also tied to the concept of survival in a traditional horror film. Survival might seem like the ultimate goal. However, in Wrong Turn 6, survival takes on a much darker meaning for Danny and his friends. Survival is not just about escaping the clutches of the inbred family. It's about confronting and accepting a part that refuses to stay buried. The film plays with the idea that survival in the context of its psychological horror is not just about staying alive. It's about survival in a world where the past is constantly in pursuit, where you are forced to confront the most disturbing aspects of yourself and your family's history. It is in these moments of survival that the film's deeper themes become most apparent. Survival is no longer just a fight for life. It's a fight for self-standing, for the ability to make peace with the horrors that shape us, and ultimately for the acceptance of an unavoidable fate. The inbred family members themselves symbolize the grotesque extremes to which these themes of legacy and identity can manifest. Their disfigured forms and twisted nature are visual representations of the damage done by a family history steeped in violence and madness. They are the literal and figurative descendants of a dark and cruel past, and their very existence challenges the notion of inheritance as something benign or neutral in their monstrous forms. They serve as a warning when the past is left unchecked. When history is not faced or understood, it can twist and contort, eventually consuming those who try to run from it. The family's grotesque appearance, as horrific as it is, becomes a symbol of the moral decay that can take root when violence and hatred are passed down through generations, festering until they erupt into something monstrous. This brings us to another central theme in the film: the fear of the unknown and the unknowable. The characters' initial reactions to the mansion, and their curiosity about the family history are rooted in the desire for knowledge and understanding. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that some truths are too terrible to bear. The more Danny uncovers about his past, the more he realizes that some things cannot be understood and some histories cannot be unraveled without consequences. The unknowable past looms over the characters, and as they try to make sense of it, they find themselves overwhelmed by its power. The unknown in Wrong Turn 6 isn't just a source of fear, it's an active presence, an almost sentient force that drives the narrative forward, pulling the characters into a spiral they cannot escape. The mystery of family, the horror of the mansion's dark secrets, becomes a metaphor for the unknowns that exist within all of us, the hidden parts of ourselves that we may fear or ignore, but that always find a way to surface. The film also explores themes of moral corruption and the breakdown of humanity. The characters, when faced with extreme situations, are pushed to their limits, revealing the primal instincts lurking beneath the surface of their personalities. This theme is most evident in the final moments of the film, when Danny, having embraced his monstrous heritage, becomes an active participant in the violence that surrounds him. It is here that the film makes its most powerful statement, that survival in a world where violence is passed down as a birthright comes at the cost of one's humanity. Danny's transformation from an innocent, confused young man into someone who is capable of violence speaks to the corrupting influence of the past who may try to resist it, but in the end he becomes part of the very legacy he sought to escape in this way. Wrong Turns 6 offers a chilling commentary on the lengths to which individuals will gotta survive and what they are willing to sacrifice to do. So ultimately, the themes of Wrong Turn 6 are a reflection of the complexities of human nature. The film uses horror not just as a means to shock, but as a lens through which we can examine our relationship with the past, with our identities, and with the darkness that lies within us. All the mansion, the family, the legacy, these are all symbols of forces that cannot be escaped, only confronted. The story doesn't offer redemption or closure because it recognizes that some horrors cannot be undone. The legacy of violence, the weight of family history, and the unbreakable bond between past and present are not easily escaped. In the end, Wrong Turn 6 leaves its viewers with a sense of lingering unease, not just because of the grotesque violence depicted on screen, but because it forces us to confront the dark corners of our own pasts, the things we cannot change, and the legacies we must carry with us, whether we want to or not. Behind the chilling twists and grisly encounters of Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort, the actors, filmmakers, and crew worked tirelessly to bring the story to life, each contributing their own unique elements to the overall tone and atmosphere of the film. The chemistry between the cast was essential, as it played a critical role in selling the central dynamics of the story. The actors had to be more than just victims of a slasher. They needed to convey authentic emotion, fear, and connection. This chemistry allowed the audience to become invested in the characters' fates, making their eventual destruction all the more impactful. Danny, played by the talented actor Anthony, Ilott, carries much of the emotional weight of the film. His portrayal of the troubled protagonist, grappling with his identity and the terrifying discovery about his past and the story. Ilott brought a sense of vulnerability to the character, making it easy for the audience to empathize with Danny's internal struggle. What made his performance stand out was the way he balanced the confusion and fear that come with uncovering disturbing family secrets. Ilott found a delicate balance between Danny's curiosity about his lineage and his growing horror at the truth on set. Ilott often talked about how he worked to make sure Danny wasn't just a generic horror movie protagonist. He wanted to make him relatable, not just someone running for his life, but a person making decisions based on genuine emotions, which made his journey even more tragic. This dedication to the depth of his character allowed the audience to connect with Danny's journey, making his eventual transformation into a part of the family's horrifying legacy all the more poignant across from him. The dynamic with the supporting cast brought a sense of realism to the story. Vicky, played by Aqueela Zoll, was another key character who added complexity to the film. Her portrayal of a strong-willed woman who is thrown into a situation far beyond her control resonated with audiences. Z's performance was grounded in her emotional response to the mounting terror around her, and her chemistry with Ilott was integral in portraying the emotional stakes there. Interactions ranged from tender moments of connection to frantic moments of survival, and Z's ability to play both sides of that emotional spectrum lent in or authenticity to the tension that simmered throughout the story behind the scenes. The cast members would frequently talk about how their shared experience of filming in such a confined and eerie setting heightened their performances. The location itself, an isolated mansion deep in the woods, became an integral part of the dynamic. In some ways, the house itself felt like a character, one that forced the actors to respond to its oppressive presence. There was an unspoken understanding on set that the isolation of the mansion mirrored the isolation of the characters. For both the cast and the crew, the mansion became a shared source of discomfort and unease, which naturally bled into the performances, the dynamic between Danny and the Twisted. Important, the actors playing the inbred family, especially the menacing family patriarch, did a remarkable job of embodying pure malevolence. They weren't just caricatures of evil, they were unsettling because their performances made it clear that there was something far more complicated beneath the surface. The actors who portrayed the family members were heavily invested in their character, psychology, and their willingness to dive deep into these disturbing personas helped elevate the stakes for Danny. The uncomfortable chemistry between Danny and the family members created a sense of tension that never quite dissipated. The horror wasn't just in the external dangers, they were a reflection of the internal horror Danny experienced as he realized what he was becoming a part of. The villains weren't simply bad guys, they were products of a twisted, grotesque legacy, and their portrayal made it clear that the true terror wasn't just the violent actions they committed, but the idea that Danny might one day become them. Filming Wrong Turn 6 wasn't without its challenges. The setting of the isolated mansion presented some logistical hurdles for the crew. The remote location of the mansion meant that every move had to be meticulously planned. The crew would sometimes find themselves hiking deep into the woods to access certain areas of the set, and the nature of the filming meant long hours in difficult conditions. Despite these challenges, the atmosphere of the location helped build a sense of authenticity that translated into the film's overall tone on set. The cast and crew spoke about how the eerie environment played a significant role in their immersion into the story. There were moments when it was so quiet out there in the woods, recalled Ilott in an interview, you could almost feel the weight of the silence. It's that kind of isolation that sticks with you. Even after the scene, and it was really hard to shake off that sense of dread. Once we were on set for director Valeri, this atmosphere was something he worked hard to integrate into the narrative. His vision for the film was rooted in creating tension through both physical and psychological means. The house's decaying interior, paired with the foreboding landscape outside, played into thematic exploration of isolation and the past. Mev knew that creating an oppressive atmosphere wasn't just about lighting or set design. It was about ensuring that everyone involved in the film felt the weight of the setting in their bones. She would often ask the actors to focus not just on their dialogue, but on the environment itself. In one memorable moment when filming in the kitchen, instructed Ilott to stand perfectly still to let the weight of the house bear down on him. The walls were closing in. Ilott recall it felt like the house itself was trying to trap me. This atmosphere of entrapment extended beyond just the physical set. MV's vision was clear. The psychological tension was as important as every creative decision was made with that in mind. As the movie neared completion, reactions from the cast and crew were mixed, but there was a sense of accomplishment in knowing that they had created something that would resonate with audiences, whether they liked it or not. Weck knew we were making something that wasn't just another slasher movies. Ed Ilott in a post-release interview, there was a lot more depth here than people might expect. The horror isn't just on the surface, that deeper layer of horror, the themes of legacy, identity, and inescapability, was what the cast believed would make the film stand out among other horror entries. They knew it wasn't a traditional film, but that it would appeal to those looking for more than just a body count. In some ways, the cast's commitment to the psychological undercurrent of the movie helped give it that extra level of intrigue. Audience reactions, however, were mixed. Fans of the Wrong Turn franchise had been waiting for the next installment, and many were curious to see where the series would go next after the events of the previous films. For some, the film hit the mark with its shocking violence and dark atmosphere, while others felt it veered too far into grim territory. The emotional depth explored in the film was praised by some critics, particularly in its focus on Donnie's internal conflict and the Enoch ESC-capable nature of his family. Legacy, however, others felt that the pacing sometimes dragged, especially in the middle portion of the film, where the tension didn't always escalate as expected. Yet, even those critics who had reservations about certain elements of the movie acknowledged that it was a film that took risks. It didn't simply rely on shock value. It asked its audience to confront uncomfortable questions about the past and the family ties that bind us. Critical reception varied as well. Some found the film to be a refreshing take on the slasher genre, appreciating its more psychological approach and its exploration of deeper themes. Others, particularly longtime fans of the series, felt that it strayed too far from the formula that made the original film a cult classic. What remained undeniable was the commitment to creating something memorable. The performances, particularly by Ilott and Zoll, were lauded for their ability to convey genuine fear and emotional conflict. The cinematography, too, was highlighted for its use of the mansion and surrounding woods, which helped to build an immersive and tense atmosphere. Yet even as critical reviews were mixed, one thing remained certain: Wrong Turn 6 made an impression. For better or worse, the film's influence also extended to the horror community, where discussions about its deeper themes and bold creative decisions lingered long after its release. Fans of the franchise began to appreciate the psychological horror elements, finding new layers to the film. With each rewatch, the film's use of atmosphere and its commitment to exploring identity, legacy, and survival were often cited as strengths that set it apart from more formulaic horror offerings. Ultimately, Wrong Turn 6, Last Resort, stands as a testament to the hard work, creativity, and dedication of the cast and crew. The behind-the-scenes challenges, the immersion in a dark and atmospheric environment, and the risk-taking approach to the story all contributed to the movie's unique identity. While reactions may have varied, the journey to make the film both on set and in the minds of its creators was a shared experience that shaped the final product, whether audiences loved or hated it. There's no denying that the film's commitment to its themes and its willingness to push boundaries left a lasting impression on the genre, even years after its release. Wrong Turn 6, Last Resort continues to linger in the minds of horror fans, carving a unique space in the landscape of cinematic horror and pop culture. While it may not have sparked the level of mainstream recognition that some of its contemporaries achieved, the film's impact on the genre cannot be underestimated. In its own way, it helped redefine what it means to take risks in a horror genre, offering not just scares, but a deep dive into the psychological and emotional elements that fuel both terror and survival. As the sixth installment in a long-running series, it marked a new chapter in the Wrong Turn franchise. Yet, it also carved out its own legacy, leaving a lasting impression on both audiences and critics alike. What set Wrong Turn 6 apart from its predecessors, and from many other films in the slasher genre, was its willingness to incorporate thematic complexity and emotional depth into a narrative typically built around bloodshed and suspense. The film didn't simply rely on the traditional formula of gruesome deaths and shocking moments of violence. Instead, it used its characters' psychological journeys and the dark secrets of family inheritance as a backdrop for exploring broader human themes like identity, legacy, and the inescapable nature of past trauma. In many ways, this shift in focus helped set the film apart from other entries in the Wrong Turn series, which had primarily leaned into the horror and shock value aspects. The emphasis on psychological horror allowed the film to leave a more lasting imprint on its audience. While many horror films focus on immediate terror wrong turns, Six burrowed into deeper fears, the ones that linger in the background long after the credits roll. It wasn't just the grotesque images or blood-soaked violence that haunted viewers. It was the emotional and existential questions raised by the story. The portrayal of Donnie's inheritance and his struggle with the dark legacy he cannot escape became an allegory for how the past often shapes our identities. Whether we acknowledge it or not, this subtle shift in narrative focus expanded the reach of the film, bringing a fresh take to a genre that often felt formulaic in this way. Wrong Turn 6 helped breathe new life into the slasher genre, introducing ideas that went beyond mere horror into the realm of introspective dread. It is not surprising then that the film became a cult favorite among fans of horror who appreciated these darker, more complex themes, while its place in the broader Wrong Turn franchise may have initially seemed like another standard slasher entry over time. It became evident that Wrong Turn 6 was anything but typical. The film's more intellectual approach allowed it to resonate with fans who sought more than the typical slasher formula of chases scenes and gory set pieces. Fans began to engage with the film on a deeper level, discussing the implications of its themes and speculating on its connection to the broader ideas of inheritance, identity, and survival. The film also stands as a testament to how his eerie's can evolve and take on new dimensions over time. It is easy to assume that a sixth installment of any franchise would be little more than a cash grab or an exercise in repeating what worked in previous films. Yet Wrong Turn 6 defied these expectations by introducing a new layer of psychological horror, showing how a series could evolve while still retaining the core elements that made it popular for many horror fans. Wrong Turn 6 became a pivotal entry, one that would set the stage for future explorations of deeper themes in the genre. Its willingness to blend traditional horror elements with more intellectual and thematic musings helped establish a blueprint for future films in the slasher subgenre that sought to explore emotional and psychological depth alongside the violence in terms of its place in pop culture. Wrong Turn 6's influence is more subtle but no less significant. It contributed to the continuing appeal of cabin in the woods horror, a subgenre of films that taps into the primal fear of being isolated and hunted, while this trope had been explored in films before. Wrong Turn 6 gave it a unique twist by combining it with a sense of tragic inevitability. This wasn't just a group of people getting lost in the woods and encountering killers. They were drawn to the mansion, a place burdened with a dark family history. The sense of destiny of being unable to escape the sins of the past set this film apart from others in the genre. It resonated with audiences who were drawn not just to the terrifying scenarios, but also to the deeper philosophical questions the film raised about inheritance, identity, and self-discovery. As Wrong Turn 6 became more widely discussed among fans and critics, its influence on the horror genre began to grow. Its themes of family legacy and inescapability began to reverberate in other films that sought to explore horror from a psychological perspective. Directors, writers, and producers took note of how Wrong Turn 6 used its setting, characters, and themes to create tension that didn't rely solely on shock and gore. The slow burn horror that was achieved through Danny's psychological journey became a model for other films looking to combine the visceral terror of slasher films with deeper, more meaningful exploration of identity and the human condition. The film's blend of horror, psychological drama, and social commentary was often cited as a catalyst for a wave of similar genre films that sought to break free from predictable tropes in the larger context of horror. Cinema Wrong Turn 6 arrived at a time when filmmakers were increasingly interested in subverting genre conventions and exploring new avenues for terror. The mid-2010s saw a resurgence of films that tackled social and psychological themes while also delivering the requisite scares. Wrong Turns X was part of this shift of film that walked the fine line between classic slasher tropes and fresh thematic innovation. Its success, or at least its cult status, signaled a growing appetite for horror films that didn't just entertain, but also invited the audience to reflect on deeper issues by introducing the idea that horror could be both visceral and thought-provoking. Wrong Turns X contributed to the evolving landscape of modern horror. The film's legacy is also tied to the ongoing cultural conversation about violence as survival and the psychological effects of trauma. These themes have become more prevalent in horror films in the years following Wrong Turn 6, with filmmakers increasingly exploring how characters are shaped by their pasts and how family history and trauma can influence individual choices and survival. In Instincts, the tension between nature and nurture, destiny and free will that Wrong Turn 6 explored became a central discussion point for viewers and critics alike. The emotional core of the film, which focused on Dan's grappling with the legacy of violence passed down to him, resonated with a larger cultural moment in which audiences were becoming more attuned to the psychological consequences of inherited trauma. It wasn't just about the brutal acts of violence. Wrong Turn 6 was about what those acts meant for the characters, how they were shaped by them, and how they could never truly escape their effects. In this sense, the film was ahead of its time, tapping into conversations about family history and identity that would become increasingly relevant in the years following its release in the context of horror fandom. Wrong Turn 6 has since become a discussion point for those looking at the evolution of the genre. It represents a shift from the more formulaic entries that dominated the early 2000s to a new wave of horror films that sought to engage with deeper themes. Its influence can be seen in films that followed, which embraced the mix of psychological horror, family drama, and brutal violence. Horror fans in particular appreciate the film's willingness to take risks and explore dark, uncomfortable subjects, rather than relying on cheap thrills or predictable tropes. In this way, Wrong Turn 6 became not just an installment in a long-running series, but a marker of the genre evolution, paving the way for other filmmakers to take similar risks in the years since its release. Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort has found a comfortable spot within the larger landscape of horror films, especially for those who appreciate its combination of psychological depth and slasher thrills. Its impact on the genre may not have been immediately apparent, but in the years following its release, it has, through its influence on other films or its exploration of deeper thematic elements. Wrong Turn 6 continues to be a film the horror fans return to not just for the scares, but for the way it makes them think, long after the final frame. Its legacy is one of risk-taking introspection and the unsettling reminder that some legacies, no matter how hard we try to escape them, remain with us forever. In Wrong Turn 6, Last Resort 2014, there are a few cars featured throughout the movie. The most notable ones are the car that Danny and his friends drive at the beginning of the film. Danny and his group of friends travel to the isolated mansion. They use a car to get there, though the specific make and model aren't heavily emphasized. 2. The family's vehicles. The cannibalistic family members use vehicles as well. Though they are not a central focus, they drive cars to chase and track the group. The movie is more focused on its eerie setting and the character survival rather than the cars themselves. So the vehicles are more functional than symbolic. The budget for Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort 2014 is estimated to be around $3 million, a direct-to-video. Release. The film had a relatively modest budget compared to big blockbuster films. Much of the budget went into creating the atmosphere, set design, the mansion, and surrounding wood special effects, and the cast and crew's performances. Although it didn't have the financial backing of major theatrical releases, the film still managed to deliver the horror and intensity expected from the Wrong Turn franchise, while working within its constraints. The specific cars used in Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort don't have their prices directly stated in the film. However, we can estimate their cost based on the types of vehicles. Scene 1: Danny and his friend's car. This car appears to be a mid-range modern vehicle, likely something like a sedan or SUV, depending on the maker model. A car like this could cost anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000. 2. The family's vehicles. The inbred family is often seen driving older trucks or vehicles that have seen better days. These vehicles are typically less expensive due to their age and condition. The cost of these types of used vehicles could range from $5,000 to $15,000 depending on the model year and condition. It's important to note that the cars in the film weren't the main focus and the vehicles weren't luxury models, so their prices are generally on the lower end of the spectrum. The movie's budget was primarily allocated to set design, special effects, and other production aspects, rather than high-end vehicles in Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort 2014. The cars used in the movie don't feature any particularly high-end or luxury vehicles. The vehicles are practical, more in line with what you might expect for low-budget direct-to-video horror film. However, I can still give you a sense of ones could be considered more expensive or less expensive when the car driven by Danny and his friends. This Karis, the most modern and could be considered the more expensive vehicle in the movie. Based on its look, it seems to be a mid-range sedan or SUV. A vehicle of this type could be in the $20,000 to $40,000 range, depending on the specific Mac model, for example, a newer model of Toyota, Honda, or Ford SUV. And while not a luxury vehicle, it's the most expensive compared to the others in the film. 2. The trucks and older vehicles used by the family. The family members, particularly the cannibalistic inbred family, are seen driving older vehicles that are clearly worn down and used. These vehicles are typically more rugged, older trucks or cars, likely chosen to reflect the character's backwards lifestyle. The cost. 4th, these vehicles would likely be much less in the range of $5,000 to $155,000, as they are older, second-hand vehicles in poorer condition. They may be less expensive in terms of their actual value, but could still hold sentimental or functional value to the characters. These types of cars or trucks tend to be practical, not luxury. None of the vehicles in the film would be considered very expensive by any stretch. The movie focuses more on its horror. Elements and vehicles are simply tools for driving the story forward, not key elements that would demand a hefty budget in the context of this film. Expensive would be relatively low compared to big-budget blockbuster movies that feature high-end luxury cars. In Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort 2014, the film's budget was relatively modest, and as such, most of the expenses went into set design, special effects, and the overall atmosphere to create the eerie horror environment rather than extravagant or very expensive items. However, there are a few elements that would have been considered more costly within the film's budget. 1. Set design and locations. The most expensive aspect of the film is likely the set, particularly the mansion, where the majority of the film takes place. The mansion is an essential part of the atmosphere, with its eerie, isolated feel, which required detailed design and possibly some extensive construction or renovation to fit the horror aesthetic. The cost of creating or renting a large old mansion would have been a significant part of the production budget. 2. Special effects and makeup. While Wrong Turn 6 is not a high-budget film, the special effects, particularly the practical effects used for the gruesome killings, gore, and deformities of the cannibal family, likely accounted for a decent portion of the budget. High-quality special effects and makeup, especially when it involves prosthetics and realistic blood effects, can be quite costly for a film of the Scale 3 casting, while the cast for Wrong Turn 6 was not made up of top-tier Hollywood stars. There were still costs involved in hiring professional actors, particularly those playing key roles, while their salaries would have been lower than A-list actors. The cost of casting, along with any stunt coordinators or additional talent, could still be considered one of the more expensive components of the production, though these elements may not be very expensive in the way that a high-budget blockbuster would have lavish cars, stars, or CGI spectacles. They were still crucial to creating the film's immersive and chilling atmosphere, and their costs would likely have been the highest areas of expenditure for the production. Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort 2014 was primarily filmed in Bulgaria, which has become a popular location for many low to mid-budget horror films, especially those that are part of long-running franchises like Wrong Turn. Bulgaria offers a variety of natural landscapes, including forests and mountains, which helped create the eerie, isolated atmosphere that's crucial to the film. Setting the choice of Bulgaria also allowed the production to take advantage of cost-effective filming locations while still capturing the rugged, backwards feel that the story required. The specific mansion central to the film's plot was likely built or modified to fit the desired aesthetic, but much of the surrounding woodland and natural settings were filmed in the country's picturesque but often hauntingly quiet areas. Bulgaria's landscape, with its Remote forests and abandoned buildings made it an ideal location for the chilling, isolation-filled environment that is essential to the horror of Wrong Turns. The eerie feel of the mansion and the surrounding woods played an important role in shaping the atmosphere and tension Wrong Turns X. Last Resort 2014 was released as a director video film, meaning it did not have a theatrical release in the United States, and thus did not have a traditional box office performance instead of a theatrical run. The film was distributed directly to home video and digital platforms, which is common for many horror franchises that may not have the same commercial appeal as larger studio films since it bypassed theaters. There are no official box office figures for its American release. However, its success was measured by DVD Blu-ray sales and digital rentals rather than traditional box office metrics. The Wrong Turn series has generally enjoyed a loyal fan base, which helped Wrong Turns X find its audience through these alternative channels. Wrong Turns X Last Resort stands as a memorable entry in the long-running Wrong Turn series, offering a fresh yet chilling perspective on the slasher horror genre. While it may not have garnered the same mainstream attention as some of the genre's blockbuster hits, it holds a special place for horror fans who appreciate a mixture of psychological depth and classic terror. The movie's haunting blend of survival horror, familial drama, and visceral brutality keeps it lodged in the minds of viewers long after the credits roll. From the very beginning, the film introduces us to a group of friends, each with their own baggage, driving toward an unknown destination, an isolated mansion deep in the woods. What seems like a routine getaway quickly devolves into a nightmare as secrets about family legacies and dark inheritances are revealed. It's a masterful setup that combines both psychological and physical horror, weaving themes of destiny and inescapable trauma into the narrative. What initially seems like a typical slasher movie, complete with remote woods, twisted killers, and a dangerous atmosphere, soon takes on deeper significance as the characters are forced to confront not just the killers chasing them, but their own complicated relationships with their pasts. One of the most striking aspects of Wrong Turns X is its willingness to break from the typical slasher formula. The film doesn't merely throw characters into a horrific situation and wait for the blood to spill. It dives deep into the psychological motivations behind their actions, particularly that of Danny. The notion of inheritance, both literal and figurative, permeates the story, creating a sense of foreboding that resonates throughout. It's not just about surviving, it's about trying to outrun a legacy that seems impossible to escape. This theme of familial ties with their power, toe shape, or destroy adds an emotional weight that elevates the film. Beyond just a gruesome survival tale, Danny struggled to come to terms with his heritage, and what it means to accept or reject the family he inherited is both compelling and tragic, pushing the film into territory rarely explored in typical slash affair. The performances in Wrong Turns X add another layer of depth to the film. While the characters might seem at first glance like the standard group of young adults caught in a dead situation, the actors bring nuance and authenticity to their roles. Danny, portrayed by Anthony Ilott, stands out as the film's emotional anchor. His internal conflict, torn between the life he thought he had and the horrifying truths about his family, becomes the heart of the film. The supporting cast, while not as fleshed out as Dan's character, still adds to the intensity of the narrative. Their performances serve the film well, ensuring that the stakes feel personal and the horror not just external, but deeply internal as well. Another standout element of the film is the setting, filmed in Bulgaria. The picturesque yet haunting backdrop of the isolated mansion and surrounding woods creates an atmosphere of dread that permeates every scene. The mansion itself, with its decaying grandeur and dark secrets, is as much a character as the people in it. The setting serves as a constant reminder that the characters are trapped not only by their circumstances, but also by the past that refuses to remain buried. The natural environment surrounding the mansion, with its thick folding forests, sees the feeling of isolation, making the character's sense of helplessness all the more pronounced. There's no way out, no escape from the horrors that await them. These on the envelope, old-fashioned, it was addressed to him, Danny, in neat block letters. His heart had skipped a beat when her read the first line: "You have inherited the estate of your late Uncle Samuel Heron." Samuel Heron, he had no idea who the man was. In fact, he'd never heard of him before that moment, but the letter was clear. His uncle had left them something our sort in the middle of nowhere deep in the West Virginia mountains. Danny was skeptical, of course. Inheritance was a strange thing, and the letter felt almost too good to be true, but curiosity and a craving for something different, something more, a chance at a new life, the allure of adventure, of escaping his mundane existence was too tempting to ignore. He had no family, no real ties, and no better plan. The idea of leaving behind his cramped city apartment and stepping into the unknown was a seductive escape. So Danny packed up his things and set out with nothing but a vague map and an address to guide him along the way. Had told a few friends about his inheritance. They all had their doubts but were intrigued. Nonetheless, the trip would be a fun little adventure. They thought something out of the ordinary. His friends Jared, Todd, and the ever-jovial Vera, a friend from his college days, jumped at the chance to join him, aged away to the wilderness tune wind to leave behind the stresses of their everyday lives. It was an offer too tempting to refuse. Vera, ever the curious one, even joked that she'd make sure Danny didn't lose his mind in the middle of nowhere. It was a running joke, one that lightened the mood on the long drive up the winding mountain roads. The journey itself was uneventful. The terrain grew rougher, the trees denser, and the air thinner as they ascended into the mountains. Though the roads became more treacherous, the kind where one wrong turn could send a car tumbling into the abyss. It was strange, though, as they got closer to the destination. A peculiar tension seemed to settle in the air, an oppressive stillness that made the car's air conditioning feel somehow inadequate. No signs of life, no other vehicles on the road. It was as if the world had forgotten this place existed. Finally, after hours of driving through the increasingly dense woods, they arrived at the entrance to the resort. At first glance, it was almost picturesque, a sprawling old building, its stone facade weathered by time, but still imposing. The resort stood at the edge of a vast forest, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets in the wind. It looked like something out of an old postcard, except there was something wrong with it. The grounds were overgrown, and the rusted gate that should have been welcoming was barely standing, sagging under the weight of neglect. There was a faint, almost imperceptible sense of decay, an air of quiet abandonment that seeped into the very bones of the place. Danny felt his light twinge in his gut, but he shrugged it off. It was probably just the age of the place. Nothing to be concerned about. The small group of friends stepped out of the cart, their boots crunching on the gravel driveway. Jared, always the jokester, made a comment about the place looking like something straight out of a horror movie. I can already hear the creepy music. He laughed. This is how it starts, right? We're all going to get picked off one by one. Ver shot him at teasing look. Oh, please, Jared. This is a vacation. No one's going to get killed by some deranged lunatic. She was the optimist, the one who always saw the best in things, the one who could turn even the darkest situations into something lighthearted. Danny smiled, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The resort might have looked like a haven from the outside, but there was an undeniable sense of our knees hanging in. The air they made their way inside, greeted by the creak of wooden floors and the musty of aged furniture. The lobby, though spacious, was eerily quiet, the silence hanging thick. The walls were adorned with faded tapestries and old paintings that seemed to stare down at them with hollow eyes. The front desk was empty, but there was a single key on the counter, labeled with Danny's name in a spidery script. Guess we're on our own, Todd said, picking up the key and inspecting it with mild curiosity. Doesn't seem like there's anyone around. Maybe they just don't get a lot of visitors, Vera suggested. But though her voice wavered slightly, as if she too felt the odd weight of the place. They made their way up the creaky stairs, the floorboards groaning under their weight. That the resort had once been something grand, perhaps a luxurious escape for wealthy tourists in a begonner, but now it was a shadow of its former self, its ages showing in every cracked tile, faded rug, and peeling wallpaper. The rooms were no better. Danny's was on the third floor, overlooking the vast, untamed forest that stretched beyond the resort's boundaries. The bed, though large, had a strange, unsettling feel to it. The sheets were immaculate, but they smelled faintly of milk. The bathroom was small, cramped, and the flickering light bulb above the mirror buzzed intermittently. It wasn't exactly what he had envisioned when he thought of an inheritance, but it would do, at least for a few days, as nightfall approached. The friends gathered in the common room, a large dark panel area with a fireplace that had long since gone cold. Jared threw his feet up on a chair, cracking open a beer. Todd was busy fiddling with the outdated television, trying to find something on the static channels. Vera sat near the windows, staring out at the woods. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, and the playful energy from earlier had slowly bled away. It was almost as if the night itself carried a weight of its own, a thick shroud that suffocated any sense of peace. You guys ever get the feeling? Something's watching us. Vera's voice broke the silence, and for a moment the others froze. Her tune was quiet, almost uncertain. Watching us, Jared repeated, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean, I don't know, she replied slowly, her gaze drifting to the darkened trees outside. It's just too quiet, like there's something out there waiting. Danny's eyes wandered to the darkening sky outside, his thoughts momentarily drifting to the unsettling feeling that had nagged at him all day. But before he could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the halls. Footsteps that were too deliberate, too rhythmic, heavy. Boots. The group fell silent, exchanging uneasy glances. The footsteps grew closer, and then the door to the common room creaked open, revealing a tall man dressed in an old worn-out suit, his face obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. He had an aura of quiet authority, but something about him made any skin-crawl guests. The man's voice was growly, almost too quiet. As Danny answered, he silently, taken aback by the man's sudden appearance. We're here to check in, the man said, nothing more, merely gesturing for them to follow him down the hallway. His silence was thick, heavy, and disconcerting, and Danny couldn't shake the feeling that he was being led deeper into something darker than he could ever imagine as the man led them down the narrow hallway. Danny's noun grew, his mind raced, trying to make sense of the odd behavior, the strange quiet that seemed to hang over everything. There was something deeply unsettling about the man. He moved with a nearly deliberate slowness, as though he had all the time in the world. The others followed behind, their footsteps falling in sync with his. Though none of them spoke, the silence was suffocating. The hallway stretched on longer than it seemed it should. The walls were adorned with old paintings, their subjects dressed in outdated fashion. Their eyes watching from the canvas very corner, they turned, felt like they were venturing deeper into the unknown, further into the heart of the resort's dark mystery. Finally, the man stopped in front of a heavy wooden door, worn by time, but still imposing. Without a word, he turned the knob and stepped aside, motioning for Danny and the others to enter. Inside, the room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting a pale yellow glow over the dusty furniture. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and stagnant air. In the corner stood an ornate desk, its surface cluttered with old papers and books. The man made his way to the desk, his every movement slow, deliberate. It was as if they were intruding on something sacred, something they had no business disturbing. Sit. The man instructed, his voice low but commanding. There was an undeniable weight to his words, a heaviness that made Danny hesitate before sitting down. The others followed suit, each of them taking a seat around the room, their faces taut with discomfort. A long silence hung in the air before the man spoke again. You've come to claim what is your shavant, you. His voice was even without the slightest hint of emotion, but there was something behind it, something hidden in his tone that made Danny's stomach tighten. Yes, Danny said, his voice almost a whisper. We came to check in. I inherited this place, but I don't understand. Who are you? What is all of this? The man's eyes narrowed, but there was no malice in the munly. Something far colder, something ancient you don't remember. Doyu said softly, the blood, the connection. Danny blinked. Confused. Blood connection. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to the desk and picked up a thick weathered ledger. He flipped it up into a page that was yellowed with a ink, faded but still legible. Your family has deep roots in this mountain, she said. Samuel Heron was your uncle. Yes, but he was also one of us, one of the ones who came before. You've inherited more than just the resort. You've inherited the curse. The words struck Danny like a physical blow. A curse. What was he talking about? His head was spinning, a rush of questions flooding his mind. But how? Why didn't I? No, Danny stammered, his heart racing. I never knew him. I never had any family here. Why didn't anyone tell me? The man's lips curled into a thin smile. It's always been this way. Those who inherit are chosen, but they never remember the bath. Blood runs deep, Danny. And now it's your turn to take your place. Before Danny could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside, followed by a scream. Vera's voice. Without thinking, Danny shot to his feet, his pulse pounding in his ears. The mank expression didn't change. You should go, he said, his voice calm, almost detached, but Danny couldn't move fast enough. His friends were in danger. He rushed out of the room, the others right behind him. The hallway was eerily quiet now, but the tension was palpable. The air felt thick as though something was waiting just beyond their reach. They burst into the common room. What they saw stopped them in their tracks. Vera was standing in the middle of the room, her eyes wide with fear. Her clothes were torn, and there was a streak of blood running down her cheek. She was staring at the wall, but her eyes weren't seeing anything. Her mouth was moving, but no sound came out. A figure stood in the corner, cloaked in shadows, its face obscured by the darkness. It wasn't human. Not in any real sense, it was something else, something twisted and wrong. The figure's movements were jerky, unnatural, like it was trying to fit into a body that wasn't its own. Vera Danny shouted, rushing toward her, but before he could reach her, the figure turned and in one swift motion, it lunged at him. Of course, no Wrong Turn movie would be complete without its brutal and terrifying violence, and Wrong Turn 6 certainly delivers in that department. The film doesn't shy away from its roots, with gruesome kills, tense chase scenes, and the bone-chilling terror that comes with facing off against a family of cannibalistic killers. Yet what sets this film apart from many other slasher movies is its careful balance between gore and psychological tension. The horror isn't just about the physical violence, it's also about the mental anguish the characters endure. Particularly Danny, as he comes to terms with the fact that is caught in a web of his family's twisted legacy. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Wrong Turn 6 is its ability to weave its horror with a sense of inevitability. There's a tragic weight to the film, as Danny and the others slowly uncover the brutal truths about their connection to the land and the family who has lived there as the body count rises. The film moves beyond mere terror to explore the ways in which we are all shaped by the past, whether it's the generational trauma of violence or the inescapable forces of fate. Wrong Turn 6 touches on something deeply primal. It's a reminder that horror isn't always about the monsters. You can see it's also about the monsters lurking within and the ways they manifest in the real world. While the film may have been released as a direct-to-video feature, it holds a lasting appeal for fans of the Wrong Turn series and horror enthusiasts who enjoy their bloodshed mixed with intellectual depth, the twists and turns in the plot, both literal and metaphorical, keep viewers engaged, and the film's ending leaves them with plenty to think about. It doesn't simply tie up neatly with a final scare, it leaves behind questions about the nature of family inheritance and survival. Even after the blood dries, the movie lingers, inviting reflection on the dark legacy that can bind us to our past for better or worse. As a part of the Wrong Turn franchise, Last Resort stands out for its blend of psychological and physical horror, showing that there's more to fear than just a chainsaw-wielding killer. Its legacy is one of a film that dared to delve deeper into the themes of familial bonds, drama, and survival, setting it apart from other entries in the slasher genre. Its haunting atmosphere, compelling characters, and emotional stakes make it a standout in a series that is often defined by its brutal killings and tense chases. So if you haven't yet experienced the gripping, unsettling world of Wrong Turn 6 Last Resort, it's time to give it a watch and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.